gassy.
Blog Talk USA. Are you tired of waiting for change?
1012, and it gives me 1,250 feet.
Announced the arrival of the flight from Los Angeles and Chicago.
Explosion.
And welcome everybody to T and Z Talk for this 23rd day of March 2016. We have a lot to get to. The primaries last night. Mixed results for the candidates, but we'll break that down. The president's still in Cuba. We'll talk about that. And of course, terror in Brussels. And that is getting very, very complicated. And a potential guest, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But being that I'm the T in T&Z, let me welcome Z to the program. Richard Zombeck joins us. Richard, of course, does some amazing work at Huffington Post and at Liberals Unite, and he is, of course, the professor of this program. And always a pleasure to do the daily show with him. And, sir, good morning to you. Good morning to you. Good morning, dear Richard. Good morning to you.
Oh, boy. I'm glad we're not roommates.
Hey, listen, you're the one that said, hey, you opening today? That'll teach you.
So that's what I get?
That's what you get.
That's what you get for making me open. You bastard.
Well, I am who I am, and that's all who I am. I better stop while I'm behind. Anyway, good morning to you, buddy. And as I said, a lot going on today, and we should probably start where we did yesterday. With the incredible stories of what happened in Brussels, the amazing amount of guilt that is going around, not to mention the criticism of what they knew and when they knew it and why didn't they stop it. And then, of course, some of our GOP presidential candidates weighed in on what happened in Belgium yesterday, which is very disturbing.
Yep. Yeah. And actually, some of the what I found interesting was some of the analysis of what's actually going on with this radicalization, right? And how they're drilling down as to who's responsible for this and what's really going on. And it kind of, taken, and I'm assuming one of the interesting comments you're talking about was Teddy Cruz. Yes.
Yeah, that would be one of the many.
And what I was looking for audio, but that comment didn't come via audio. It came via a press release and a statement on his website. Would you like me to read that, Tony?
Please do.
I will. Please allow me. What he said is, we will do what we can to help fight this scourge, or score, yeah, and redouble our effort. Scourge. Anyway, let me start again. We will do what we can to help them fight this scourge and redouble our efforts to make sure it does not happen here. We need to immediately halt the flow of refugees from countries with a significant Al-Qaeda or ISIS presence. We need to empower law enforcement to patrol and secure Muslim neighborhoods before they become radicalized. Yeah. So my immediate question is, where are these Muslim neighborhoods? Where?
Well, listen, they must be in my neck of the woods.
Well, I've got a family down the street that are Muslim. In fact, the guy, he's probably in his 70s, walks their dogs about 27 times a day. He's always out there walking his dogs. And in fact, committed an act of terrorism about 2 weeks ago. He picked up his dog's poop and put it in my empty trash can right after the trash guys had come to collect the trash. And I went out. And,
how dare he?
Yeah, and I was out there moving my trash cans back into, under cover and safety, and looked in there, and there was a bag of dog poop. And he's a Muslim and lives right up the street from me. So I'm wondering if we need a bigger police presence in my neighborhood for the scourge of Muslim radicalized jihadist Muslim Islamists that are infiltrating our neighborhoods. I mean, this is probably one of the most ridiculous comments made from anyone in recent history.
I would suggest what you really need are tighter garbage can lids. And that would probably solve the problem. But
well, no, it wouldn't, because the garbage guys wouldn't put the lids back down. They never do. They just throw the cans across the street.
It's kind of like dudes that don't, put the toilet seat down or lift it before they go to the bathroom. And I'm making light of this for a reason, because of the ridiculous nature of what Mr. Cruz had to say.
Well, and here's the thing, and this was an interesting comment, because someone made this on, I think it might have been Facebook, it could have been Twitter, but they said 26 people killed in Belgium. We need to patrol neighborhoods. 26 killed in Sandy Hook. That's just the way it goes, right? So
wow, that's profound.
Well, and it brings up a very interesting question, doesn't it? Why is it that when it's supposed Muslims that are doing this, we need to build walls, we need to throw them out, we need to invade mosques, we need to patrol streets. But when a white guy walks into a church in North Carolina and shoots up a church or a school or a college campus, we're not patrolling the neighborhoods where they have open carry and questioning open carry people. Why aren't we standing outside of shopping malls and going, hey, where are you going with that gun? Hey, what do you plan to do with that? Hey, why are you carrying that? And, but you go to a mosque and all of a sudden, boy, we need to be watching these people closer.
Yeah, and all of a sudden this is Hillary Clinton's fault because of what happened in Libya with regime change. Which is just an interesting stretch of the imagination. But hey, we'll let it stand where it is. Out of curiosity, what was the reaction in your part of the world or in your mind to Ted Cruz's comment?
Well, I mean, it was obviously ridiculous. If you're alluding to an audio clip that we have, we can... Well,
in fact, I am.
We can certainly get to that, because the mayor of New York, Bill de Blasio, and the New York Police Department chief, Bill Bratton, had a couple words to say about the illustrious and ever hateful Ted Cruz. So let's play that clip.
I just want to speak, and I can't speak to that one.
Yeah, we both want to speak to this one. I just have to say it's reprehensible. His comments are not about safety and security. It's demagoguery. We have 900 Muslim American officers in the NYPD. We have peace-loving, law-abiding Muslim Americans in neighborhoods all over New York City. They should be respected like all other members of our community. So the question is, if any individual might commit a crime, if any individual might commit an act of terror, we're going to be all over them. And again, NYPD has extraordinary ability to deal with any threat or any lead. But to paint an entire community with that brush is absolutely counterproductive. By the way, it's immoral. It does not conform with American values, but it's also counterproductive. It's a great way to alienate thousands and thousands of people and make them feel like they don't belong in this country, and that's not good for anyone.
I would remind the senator he lives in the United States of America. And the statements he made today is why he's not going to become president of this country. Because we don't need a president that doesn't respect the values that form the foundation of this country. As the mayor mentioned, I have over 900 very dedicated officers in this department, many of whom do double duty. They serve as active duty members of the U.S. military in combat, something the senator has never seen. So before he starts denigrating any population group, take a close look at who he's denigrating. I take great offense at his characterization of that whole population, particularly with my intimacy with the population in my organization of Muslim officers who are willing to sacrifice their lives in foreign countries and every day step up willing to sacrifice their lives here. So the senator basically, he's really out of line with his comments.
Amen. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mayor.
Now, what I liked in particular in Bratton's comment was that he brings up Cruz's lack of, ever serving in the military, which I thought was it's about time that, we start making that a point.
By the way, every time Ted Cruz brings that up, he goes out of his way to punctuate that by saying that none of the remaining candidates have served in the military.
Yeah. Right.
Because that makes a difference. Listen, in my part of the world, which is the largest concentration of Arab Americans outside the Middle East and the highest concentration of Muslims outside the Middle East, the response is this. Tonight they're holding a prayer vigil for the people of Belgium. That was their response.
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, this is. I mean, we have such an ignorant mass of people. I mean, just looking at the amount of people that are actually, supporting Trump and think that he's actually going to be able to build a wall and make Mexico pay for it. So this is what we. This is how we handle this situation. It's like, oh, there are terrorists in Belgium. Oh, this is why we need to build a wall. We need to be patrolling Muslim neighborhoods. So here's the interesting thing, Tony, and I came across this actually this morning when you and I were talking. And let me give a little bit of a backstory on this. I'm watching the news yesterday, and typically what I do, because I'm insane, is while I'm watching the news, I've got my tablet out and I'm trying to get some audio and save some stories and figure out what I'm going to write next. And in the background, I hear that the background checks on a lot of these quote unquote terrorists are felonious, right? They have criminal records, and they're not first time offenders. And then I came across an article this morning in Vox, and I'll go through this real quick because I know we have a guest today. But this is from Alain Grignard, who's a senior member of Belgium's Federal Counterterrorism Task Force. And what he said to the CTC Sentinel yesterday is previously we were mostly dealing with radical Islamists, individuals radicalized towards violence by an extremist interpretation of Islam. But now we're increasingly dealing with what are best described as Islamized radicals. The Islamic State has legitimized their violent credo, their violent street credo. So what he's basically saying is that criminals, career criminals, are being given the opportunity to play their video games in real time and in real life, and are becoming Islamized as a way to live out their violent fantasies. So this isn't a question of Islam radicalizing and making people violent. It's about violent people being attracted to a religion or to a bastardization of that religion that promotes terrorism and giving them a chance to do what they want to do. I find that analysis increasingly interesting only because of the level of violence and gun deaths and crimes that we have in this country, how easy it would be to get some of the Americans on their side and give them a way to kill people.
Well, there is probably some truth to that, and we'll jump back to this a little bit later on. But let me introduce my next guest. But let me give a little background first. I have had an association with the Michigan League for Public Policy for many years during my show, Richard Zombeck, as you know, and they come out annually with an update on child poverty. It's called Kids Count in Michigan. But I think that by extension, there's so much to be learned from this that it applies to a national model as well. And so joining us now is the Michigan Project Director at the Michigan League for Public Policy, Alicia Guevara Warren, who is going to walk us through a little bit of the report. And by the way, Z, the headline reads, Child Poverty Increases in 80 of 83 Michigan counties and hurts well-being. And certainly in light of what's happening with Flint, Michigan, as you and I have discussed on numerous occasions, this is applicable. So, Alicia, let me welcome you to the program, and I appreciate you taking some time to be with us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
This is a devastating report, and for a variety of reasons. But when we talk about the role of government, whether we're talking about what's happening in Flint, Michigan, or what's happening to our children throughout the state of Michigan, the Michigan League for Public Policy has always been very fair and equitable in these reports. And part of what this reads to me is that government is failing our citizens at many levels. But when we talk about our children, Alicia, this is inexcusable.
No, I agree. And after 25 years of producing an annual kids count in Michigan data book, unfortunately, the 2016 report shows a lot of the same things that, have been going on for some time. We continue to see disparities in outcomes by race, ethnicity, place, and income, and child poverty continues to be unacceptably high. And this is in a time when we've, continued to hear that Michigan is a comeback state and that, we're experiencing an economic recovery. But I think you're right. The crises that we've seen in Flint and the Detroit public schools, it's clear that, kids are struggling everywhere, and, policymakers clearly have some work to do to improve these conditions for all kids in our state.
Well, interestingly, and before I give Richard Zombeck a chance to ask a question, journalist Chad Slawski, who I believe you're familiar with, posted a story this morning, Alicia, that shows that Michigan is last in the nation in investing in our communities. And certainly this is a direct reminder of how we continue through what I would suggest is the governor's business approach to leading and how it's failed us at many levels, whether it's the way we're not certainly properly funding our public schools and allowing charters to be unaccountable. But at the bottom line, as we continue to fail our children, as this report points out, there are policies that should be put in place, that can be put in place, that would radically change how this report has played out. And, I want to remind this audience, and I want to remind anybody that's listening to the program right now, that these are deliberate decisions that are either not being made or being made. And in our case, unfortunately, these are decisions that are not being made.
I think you hit it right on. We've seen across, state government in particular, that state leaders have been so focused on, the bottom line, on reducing spending, and so much so that, basic services like clean water and safe schools have really suffered. And, we continue to see that, nearly 1 in 4 kids is living in poverty in Michigan, including 47% of African American children and 32% of Latino children. And in particular, when we start talking about, investing in our own communities and what that looks like, Michigan has one of the highest rates of concentrated poverty for children, children living in high poverty neighborhoods. We have 17% of kids in Michigan that live in a high poverty neighborhood, and it's so disturbing when we think about the breakdown by race and ethnicity. We have the highest rate of concentrated poverty for African American children in the country, one of the top 5 highest for Latino kids, and we fall in the top 20 of states with the highest rates for American Indian children. So when we start talking about the impacts on child well-being, we know that the communities that our kids are growing up in, that has an impact on their development, whether it's the fact that they can't, walk to school safely, or they go into school, hungry, or, all of these types of things that they carry with them is what we call toxic stress. And once, they're living in chronic poverty for a long time, those effects, lead into their well-being as adults. And so there are some long-term impacts to not investing in our communities. And, we are underfunding our local governments by about 70% right now, and we really need to be thinking about how we can create better communities by investing in them for our kids and for their well-being and quality of life issues.
So, Alicia, this is Richard Zombek. First of all, welcome to the show. Every time I hear something about this, I have discussions with people, and there's always what usually starts the conversation is we're the greatest country in the world. And my comment is always, well, no, we're not. I mean, and just looking at the numbers, America, the wealth in America just over the past 6 years has grown by 60%, by over $30 trillion. And at the same time, the number of homeless kids and kids that are on food stamps and kids that are living in poverty has also grown by, ironically, that same 60%, right? At this point, we're like second in the world in child poverty, one of the highest rates in the world of industrialized nation after Romania. And I mean, my question is always, why aren't we hearing more about this? Why isn't this a major, and it's probably an obvious question. And, I'm sure, your answer is going to be, what I hear all the time, but I mean, this is crucial. And we're not talking about this. We're not hearing about this. It's a blip on like page 30 of a website or of a newspaper, and it doesn't even make the main news.
No, and it's really unfortunate, and as we think about, all of these education reforms or, reforms in healthcare that we're seeing the state trying to move, we're not going to see, the outcomes that we really want if we don't start addressing child poverty. We are really leaving behind so many kids, and it has an impact on our entire state, our entire, country when we aren't addressing these issues. And that, I think, is partially why, the Kids Count Project and what we do here at the League, we take it so, we're very passionate about it because we need to keep, that message that we are leaving people behind. The types of jobs that are being created in this economy are not, providing that wage that, folks need. Oftentimes we hear that, well, if somebody just worked full-time, they wouldn't struggle. But unfortunately, when we start crunching the numbers, we see that, even working a full-time minimum wage job is not enough to lift a family out of poverty. We've continued to see, a high number of kids, about a third of kids are living in families where their parent doesn't have secure employment, so we're seeing a lot of parents really having to piece together part-time work, seasonal work, temporary work, and that really isn't going to provide that type of economic security that, families need. And, we just have to keep, I guess, sounding that message and continuing to push people to say, this is an issue, and a lot of times I think part of it is kids don't have that voice, and so they rely upon child advocates and others to really try to lift the issue to the forefront.
Well, Alicia, in following up on conversations I've had with multiple members of the Michigan League for Public Policy, which, by the way, can be found online at mlpp.org, the attack on the earned income tax credit here in the state of Michigan was devastating and continues to be an issue that astounds people from around the country. When I mention this to people that do advocacy work for families and children and share with them that piece of information, they don't believe me at first. They're astounded that something like this could actually happen. And as you and I and Richard know, the Earned Income Tax Credit is something that, again, is earned. It's earned. And although we still have the federal EITC in place, the Michigan one has disappeared.
And, it's quite honestly, it's almost embarrassing, right, when you start thinking around the country that other, states are either strengthening or expanding or implementing, for the very first time their state EITC, because we know that it's a proven poverty reduction tool. And one of the things that I always tell people, when they wonder if it's a good thing, I'm like, this is one of the things that President Obama and Congressman Ryan agree on. I mean, that should be, enough of an indication to us that this is a good tool that helps parents in order to help kids. There are so many benefits that children get by having that the extra income in their household, and it's a tool that it encourages people to work, like you said, and allows them to keep more of what they earn. So it is really striking that we continue to have that conversation and have seen the effects of that.
What about child care? Is that an issue in the report? Is that something that you would address in the kids count report?
It is, and child care is such a cost factor, right? When we look at how much it costs, and we actually break this down by county level, so if folks are interested in seeing, the average cost of child care in their county, and then also how much of a minimum wage earning child care costs consume. Those are available on our website as well. Across the state, we see that, child care costs consume about 40% of a minimum wage income. Now, that is huge. That's almost, we're getting close to half of what that costs. So we really need to be thinking about how we can, increase access to, assistance for affordable quality child care. Currently, about less than 2% of kids across the state are accessing the subsidized assistance program for child care, even knowing how costly it is in the impact on somebody's household budget. So this is another one of those recommendations that we see as, this two-generation approach. The best way to help kids is to help, their parents, and, allowing access to affordable quality child care allows parents to go to work and stay in work, and then also provides that early learning experience that kids need in order to be better prepared for kindergarten. So there are also long-term, effects to having that available. So we really talk about how we can, raise the eligibility level for subsidized care. Michigan has, one of the lowest eligibility levels in the country as far as, allowing families to access this assistance. So expanding who can access that care is really important.
And Alicia, it's Richard Zombik again. I was looking at kind of a rundown of the Kids Count report, and investing in communities, creating quality schools, safe neighborhoods, all the stuff that you talked about. Of course, there's clean air and water, which as we know has had a little bit of an issue in Michigan recently. But are these programs? I mean, are these being pulled back in certain neighborhoods? And is this something that should be affordable? I mean, Tony and I always talk about when you have a CEO or someone in business running a state who thinks that the way to be successful at running something is to make money, when we all know that a successful government brings in money and puts it back out. Where's the roadblock and the disconnect on this on this particular aspect of that?
I think that's what you said exactly, is just this difference in philosophy of how we run a government. Like I said earlier, it's, there's been a lot of focus on how to reduce spending when we go into, a distressed, financially distressed community, how to, balance the budget, but it's not about how do we, provide the services for people. It's putting, money and numbers before actually thinking about the people that are going to be impacted by, the decisions that are made. And I think that's, a big problem, is just thinking about, we need to be investing in people. When we see other states that are doing better, the National Kids Count Project also ranks the states every year. In Michigan, we've fallen for 2 years in a row. In our ranking, we're 33rd. We're last in the Midwest. And, for the first time in decades, a non-New England state made it to number one, and that was Minnesota. And what do we know Minnesota has done, over the past, several years? They've invested in their people. They, haven't put, reducing spending and, balancing budgets as their first priority. It's how can we prioritize, our money to invest in our people. One of the things that we often say is, your budget is the single largest expression of your priorities. And so how are you investing in people and kids in order to create, a better state? And, there are economic benefits to, having more kids graduate from high school and having more parents, in the workforce. So I think it's just a difference in what comes first.
Well, and, Alicia, real quickly, because I don't want to forget this. It is the major media in Detroit has just announced within the last 10 minutes that the governor is now calling for a review of emergency managers in Michigan. As you are well aware, some of the most devastatingly hit communities throughout the state are controlled by emergency managers. Do you see a direct correlation between the undemocratic emergency managers and the lack of funding for programs like child care in public schools and other infrastructure issues that impact families that can't afford by virtue of not having really a living wage job, etc.? And I would think you would agree with the governor that it is time to revisit the emergency manager law.
Absolutely. I think that, that here I was actually in a meeting prior to this call, so I didn't know that announcement had been made, so that's really good news, I think, to hear, because we have seen, I think, Flint and DPS, we can clearly see that, people weren't put first in those decisions, and it's just so troubling and disturbing and shocking to think about the conditions that the kids in DPS have been, going and staying in school and, having to be surrounded in those types of conditions and expected to, perform well on these tests and then to be able to succeed, academically. It's just unreal to me. So, yeah, I do think that that's a good thing that we're going to see a review of that, because I think it has had a major impact on some of these things because of that philosophy and that focus on, budgets versus people.
All right. See, I'm sorry. Go ahead and ask your question.
No, that's okay. I always look at this kind of stuff, and what we were talking about before with the governor and their kind of the way they run a state, and short of replacing or electing someone else, this seems to me to be not only just educating the legislators, but educating the voters as to who they should be voting for and who they should be putting in office, and how this whole thing with money in and money out works. And it becomes, an enormous task to get people to understand, because I find, particularly with voters on the right and Republicans that I talk to, they have that same kind of look of things. It's like, well, he's doing really well because we've got, $3 million or $30 billion in the bank and we're running a surplus, and that's a great thing. And it seems to be overall across all walks of life that there's a misunderstanding of how taxes and income at a government level works, and that it should be going towards infrastructure and helping the people. I mean, after all, this is the way I look at it. It's my money. It should be invested in me. And, and for some reason, to a lot of people, that seems to be a very selfish attitude. I don't know. Where do you start to get people to understand that this is crucial?
In part of, the purpose of the Kids Count Project, it's not just to provide this data and information and, to give these recommendations to policymakers, but because we break it all down locally, our hopes are that, local community members will be having these conversations, taking this data in, these numbers. We try to break it down in hopefully a somewhat simple way to be able to look at it and say, things are headed in the right direction or the wrong direction, and here's where you rank compared to other counties. But to be able to take that information and think what they can do locally as far as determining their needs and their strategies, but to also have those conversations with, policymakers that are currently in office and, also thinking about, we have upcoming elections here. How do we ensure that, candidates are looking at these numbers and prioritizing kids going forward?
Well, Alicia, before we let you go, and I appreciate the time that you've given us, there are some devastating statistics that I quickly want to share with the audience and ask you to comment on, including nearly 1 in 4 children in Michigan live in poverty, 22.6%, a 23% increase in the rate over 2006 and 2014. Child poverty is seen higher for kids of color, 47% of African Americans, 32% for Hispanics, compared to 16% for white kids. Another statistics, 32% of children live in a household where no parent has secure employment. On average, monthly child care consumed about almost 40% of 2015 minimum wage earnings, and it actually gets worse from there. And so, we are just we are seeing this kind of devastation. It's the year 2016. We know that the failed policies of a certain political party here in the state of Michigan have contributed to this report. And it's interesting because I spoke with Peter Rourke a few months back, and one of the things we discussed when it comes to the reports that the Michigan League for Public Policy puts out is that legislators often ignore them, even when lobbying efforts are done. And of course, your CEO, Gilda Jacobs, one of my heroes, must be very frustrated by the fact that she invests a lot of time sitting in front of legislative conferences and meetings only to have the reports like this ignored.
It is frustrating, but when we do this type of information and we break down the local data, I think that we really are trying to encourage people at the local levels, to go in so that, there are multiple ways of coming at it, right, from the state level and from the local level, and thinking about how local communities can really put the story, the local story and the local context behind these numbers to hopefully make this a little bit more real for policymakers to see that this is what's happening in my community, in my backyard, and here's a very concrete example of how these policies have changed. So I really am hoping that people will start taking this information that we provide and go talk to people, their own policymakers. So it is frustrating, I think, as we continue to put this out, but I'm hopeful that people in local communities will be able to take this information and start trying to talk to their policymakers.
All right, very quickly, Richard Zombeck wanted to make a point about the former food stamp program, and Z, I think this is an important point to make.
Well, so what I came across here was what we were talking about is about the 2014 Farm Bill, and that they cut $8.6 billion for over the next 10 years from the food stamp program. And that in 2007, about 12 out of every 100 kids were on food stamps, and that today it's about 20. So when people talk about it's scumbags and leeches and, people sponging off the system. We're talking about kids here. I mean, 20 out of 100 kids. I mean, a fifth of the children in this country are relying on food stamps. To me, that's astronomical. That's third world numbers as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. And, and I'll just add that when we look at some of our other, state level programs that have taken hits, like the Family Independence Program, your traditional, cash assistance program, 75% of participants in that program are kids. And we've continued to see, a lot of changes that have, restricted access to that. And while we're continuing to see, an increasing number of kids living in extreme poverty, these state-level programs are not able to respond and meet the needs, of kids. And so I would agree with you wholeheartedly that, it's getting people to understand that these are kids that are being impacted.
All right. Again, our guest has been Alicia Guevara Warren, Kids Count Michigan Project Director at the Michigan League for Public Policy. Again, you're going to find all the information you need to know about the Michigan League at mlpp.org, and I do recommend that you go check that out. Alicia, I have a feeling this is not the last time we'll chat. I want to thank you for the generous amount of your time. We kept you a little longer than we said we would, but this was too critical a topic to just leave it to 15 minutes.
Well, I appreciate it, and I would definitely encourage everyone to go and, check out the information and use it to hopefully make some improvements for kids in our state, because that is, the purpose of this project. So,
absolutely.
Thank you, Alicia.
Our pleasure. Thank you. Z, just devastating, and this is part of a national effort. The Kids Count program is available, and a report is done in every state. And she had mentioned that this is the first time outside of the New England states where a state has done well, and that's Minnesota. And as we know, Minnesota has invested in schools, and they have invested in wages, and they have become the fastest growing economy in the country, not by accident, my friend.
Yeah, unlike, places like Wisconsin and Kansas and, places like that have cut those programs in order to save money and seen devastating, absolutely devastating results, not only in their economy, but with their citizens. It's a ridiculous premise to say, oh, well, we're going to cut stuff for people that benefits people in order to make our state better. I don't even know what brand of logic that makes sense. Again, speechless.
Well, this is something, again, I can only speak to the state of Michigan because I have an ongoing relationship with the Michigan League and have had both their CEO and many of those that help to educate us on the issues that the Michigan League for Public Policy does. And again, the point I was making about legislators not looking at these reports. Many of them laugh at them as if it's some kind of joke. They think that they are the Michigan League for Public Policy is a partisan organization, which they are not. They're nonpartisan. But they don't care about that. They care about, like she said, budgets, not people.
Yeah, which makes no sense for someone running a government. That's something that I've never been able to understand. And we've got Donald Trump, who's basically ahead in the polls and really probably going to be the nominee for the Republican Party, who not only has gotten the acclaim because he's a businessman, and people in this country seem to think that someone that can run a business is going to be able to run a government. But he's not a very good businessman. And, so really I have a hard time understanding people that are looking at this and going, oh yeah, well, he's run a business and he's been really successful, and so he can run the country. When in fact, he's been in bankruptcy. He's failed at business. Most of his businesses have failed, but because he's in business, he knows how to run a government. And this is what we're dealing with, Tony. I mean, just morons.
Well, there are plenty of those. And in fact, speaking of morons and speaking of Donald Trump, he had a little bit to say about what happened in Brussels yesterday. And I think it's appropriate that we listen to what he said.
What would you say would be appropriate in terms of what they can do to him at this moment to get any information they can about possible further attacks?
Well, I would say they should be able to do whatever they have to do. They have to get the information, and I would say they should be able to do whatever they have to do.
Be specific,
now, they won't
if you
do
will.
that because the laws are so liberal over there. They won't do that. But they should be able to do whatever they have to do to get him to give the information. And the very sad thing is he was being guarded and protected by people that were a few doors away from where he lived. And they were protecting him and they were guarding him. And it was lucky they were able to find him. And he was planning another attack. But they didn't find him because people turned him in. Those people were guarding him and protecting him. That's not supposed to be the way the system works.
When you say do whatever they have to do, can you be specific? I mean, what do you mean by that?
Well, I'm not looking for breaking news on your show, but frankly, the waterboarding, if it was up to me, and if we change the laws or have the laws, waterboarding would be fine. And if they want to do, as long as it's with, because, we work within laws. They don't work within laws. They have no laws. We work within laws. The waterboarding would be fine, and if they could expand the laws, I would do a lot more than waterboarding. You have to get the information from these people, and we have to be smart, and we have to be tough, and we can't be soft and weak, which is what we are right now. When I say we, I'm talking about other countries also.
If you talk to experts who do these interrogations, you often find a division. Some people think that kind of harsh interrogation technique works and will deliver you the information, and others say it doesn't work, you'll get false information. Are you in the camp that harsh interrogation, let's use the word torture, works in a case like this?
Yes, I am. I am in that camp. I don't believe the other people. I am in that camp. Absolutely. They'll read him his rights. He'll sit there with a good lawyer. The lawyer won't give any. 10 years will go by. By the time it goes by, he won't know anything because the world will have moved on to an even worse place. No, I am in the camp where you have to get the information, and you have to get it rapidly.
Well, let's keep in mind, though, draw the distinction here that Abdeslam is being held by Belgian law enforcement, not by some military unit or by some intelligence service, like was the case here in this country when the CIA took some of these suspects to secret sites in other countries. He's being held by the Belgian justice system.
That's okay. I mean, he's being held by whoever. Let the military take him over. They have to get their act together. Belgium is no longer Belgium. Belgium is not the Belgium that you and I knew, Matt, from 20 years ago, which was one of the most beautiful cities and one of the safest cities in the world. Belgium is a horror show right now, and, terrible things are happening, and people are leaving, and people are afraid. And this all happened because, frankly, there's no assimilation. They are not assimilating, and they're not assimilating in other locations either for whatever reason.
Just a couple of seconds.
They want to go by Sharia law. They want Sharia law. They don't want laws that we have. They want Sharia law. And, you say to yourself, at what point, how much of this do you take? And what we're doing is we're allowing thousands and thousands of these people into our country, and we're going to have nothing but problems as sure as you're sitting there.
So
wow,
yeah. So he manages to insult again an entire country and alienate them, but will change the laws if he becomes president, obviously, to allow all kinds of horrendous acts and torture. But what was also interesting was he's saying that Belgium became a hellhole because they're not assimilating people. This is coming from a guy who wants to alienate 1.6 billion people from even entering the country.
Well, I'm all right. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. Do me a favor. After hearing that, we have some audio from the other day that we haven't played yet. And these are people that support Donald Trump having heard every insane thing the man has ever said. Now, this is long, but ladies and gentlemen, so worth hearing. Do that, and maybe I can collect my thoughts during that.
Yeah, let me just make one quick point. Is that since 9/11, the quote-unquote terror attacks on this soil have been, by a majority, perpetrated by white terrorists. Of the 18 terror attacks, 5 had ties to Islamic extremists. The rest have been by white fundamental and Christian terrorists. So who's not being assimilated? But yeah, let's play that clip from Trump supporters. This is actually I do want to apologize for this audio because the people that actually put this together seem to have a little bit of trouble with their mic, so the interviewer does come up a little louder. But still, like you said, Tony, this is well worth listening to because this is someone interviewing Trump supporters outside of a rally.
Right, Trump.
I think Trump, he's honest. We don't need a Barack in office no more because he's a liar. He can't be direct. Hillary Clinton is a criminal. Bernie Sanders is a socialist. He will believe in taking away all our freedom. He'll control the way we eat, the way we sleep, the way we live. Trump.
How's Bernie Sanders going to control all that?
You know, he'll find a way. Bernie Sanders, he believes in socialism. If everybody knows correct history, they would know that Hitler was also a socialist, or he was a different type of socialist.
He was a fascist.
Fascist, yeah, socialism, fascism.
Very different.
It is. It runs in the same category, but it's different.
I'm more with Trump because of that, because he's being bullied by the government, and they need to be together, and they ain't right now.
Why is he being bullied by the government?
I mean, you can see. I mean, everybody's kind of picking on him because he's the man in power. Everybody wants him as president.
It's interesting because a lot of people say Trump's a bully, but you're saying he's being bullied.
Yeah, I think he's being bullied and taken up for himself.
I mean, Obama's trying to control the Constitution. He's trying to take away our amendments. He's trying to, change history. And I just feel like...
What amendment is he trying to take away from you?
Second Amendment, by taking away guns.
Has he knocked on your door and took your gun?
He hasn't yet. But I know if you give him time, I'm sure he will in time.
Do you understand why protesters have come out?
I don't think he's racist, man. I think it's just people putting that in their own heads. They said something about KKK endorsed him and stuff like that, but I don't think they did. I mean,
a lot of people had an issue because he was on CNN and he was asked directly, do you denounce the KKK? And he's usually strong in the way he answers things, and he was just like, well, I don't know anything. So people thought he was trying to basically keep them in his, good favor.
It could be, but I'm still with him with the...
Don't you would agree you want someone who's going to denounce the KKK?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. I mean, I'm not racist or anything, I love black people, I love white people, I love all America, I
feel like a lot of them protesters are just doing this for attention because they're just following the crowd. I feel like...
You think they're out here on a rainy day for attention?
I feel like they're doing it. I feel like it's a trend. And if they're out here in the rain, then they can be like, you know what, I'm strong enough to be out here in the rain. And
all right, it's not only here. I mean, Chicago, Cleveland, Kansas City. We were in Burlington, Vermont. It's all over the place. So I can tell you it's not for attention. Why do you think they're doing it?
You know what? I don't know. Some of them don't even... I don't even know if some of them will go voting.
I feel like that Trump is the one that wants to really try to help us out and make America better.
What do you think he's going to do for your wallet, make you more money? What is he going to do for your life?
You know what? I know he doesn't really get into detail about a lot of his issues.
No details at all.
He doesn't, yeah, and that's one thing that I don't agree with a lot, but he's a businessman. He's made himself a lot of money, so maybe he'll help America with a lot of money.
The American dream is dead. I will bring it back bigger and better and stronger than ever before.
You agree with him that President Obama wasn't born here?
You know what? Obama says he was born in Hawaii, I think. And
his birth certificate that he showed says that.
Yeah, so I mean, if he has proof, he was born in America, but he has. I mean, he agrees with. I feel like agrees with a lot of Islam and Muslims, stuff like that. And
how so? He goes to church. He says he's Christian.
But he's also associated with a lot of Islam too, a lot of Muslims.
How?
He's admitted it. He's had Muslims come to the White House, and
there's a lot of Muslims who live in America, fight in the military. What's wrong with that?
There's nothing really wrong with Muslims. You
just don't want them in the White House.
I just don't want to take the risk of any of the ones that he does bring in the White House having ties with anything negative and any terrorism at all. I know there are white people that's also terrorists.
I was about to say, there's a lot of right-wing extremism.
Yeah, like the one that shot up that movie theater. I know that one.
And the church in South Carolina and the Planned Parenthood in Colorado. It seems like the predominant theme here is Muslim terrorism, but I don't see an outcry about all the mass shootings, all the right-wing terrorism that happens.
Right, I do agree with that, definitely. And there are a lot of white terrorists, and terrorism doesn't have to do with color. It has to do with how you act and what you do.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
Do you agree with that stuff, like banning Muslims from coming in the country? He made it seem like most of the immigrants that are Mexican are rapists and drug lords. It's talk that can be misinterpreted by many as playing on racism.
I feel like you shouldn't, like I said, use somebody's color or race against them. They should do a background check at least and see what they have ties with. And if they have ties with any terrorist group, they shouldn't let them over here. But
so you don't agree with his complete Muslim ban?
Right, I don't agree with it fully. I don't. And that's why I come here, just to see what he really has to say in person. And, there's a lot of stuff I don't agree with Trump. I'd like to see Ted Cruz.
So you're a Trump supporter? Because you've been saying a lot of things you don't like.
I am. I support him for the most part. But, with everybody, there's stuff that you don't agree with. You can't agree with everybody 100%.
So what's the theme here, Tony, that when you're presented with facts and an opportunity to defend your candidate, it just falls apart?
First of all, I'm glad that I didn't see the young man, and I hope I never do in public. This reminds me a handful of years ago, there was a Sarah Palin book signing. And somebody worked the crowd and just asked a bunch of questions. And, there were people saying, you realize that she can see Russia from her kitchen window. Yeah, okay. By the way, it was announced this morning that Sarah Palin is going to be doing a new reality TV show where she will act as a judge, similar to Judge Judy and all the other shows that are out there. That should be interesting.
Isn't that great? Caribou Barbie's now going to be a judge.
Yeah, and when the production company was asked, she doesn't have a JD. She has no judicial experience at all. Why would you choose her? And they said, because she's got a great personality. Anyway, back to Donald Trump, as we're literally a minute away from having to get out of here. These are the kind of people that scare the hell out of me, because he was giving a less than full-throated endorsement. In fact, at the end, said that he would support Ted Cruz. Yet he was defending Donald Trump as a successful businessman who knows how to make money.
Yeah. So I want to clear up the numbers that I had before, and this is why it's a little confusing, is because it looks like half, but it's not. There have been a total of 18 terror attacks from white Americans and 9 attacks with ties to Islamic extremists. So that doesn't mean that Islamic extremists are responsible for half of the attacks. There have been 18 attacks from white Americans and 9 attacks from Islamic extremists, for a total of 27. And the other number that's interesting is that 165 out of 182 terrorists were white. So we obviously don't have a Muslim problem. We have an anger and killing problem.
Astounding. And an astounding show today. We are out of time, Z. As always, how can people get more info?
As usual, tnztalk.com. All the information you'll ever need, but we're afraid to ask. And all of our links, Facebook, Twitter, how to follow us. And please, 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 I'm on my knees now. Go to iTunes, rate us, review us, and give them the opportunity to profile us and show us to the rest of the world.
And just very quickly, our pleas are making a difference. And so for those that will, please do go and rate us accordingly. And hopefully you'll rate us well. Anyway, that'll do it for us for today. What a show. I want to thank everybody at Blog Talk USA, Rihanna and Ron, and everybody that makes this thing hum. Of course, thanks to my partner, Richard Zombeck. We will be back tomorrow. In the meantime, and as always, we ask that you be well.
Oh yeah, can you feel it? Just over the credits, just riffing now. Words and chords. Not the poetry and the real thing, but not bad for an ad-lib. Not good, but... And it's not long enough, so just do a little bit more. And that's nearly done. That's the final credit there. That's the end.